Welcome, honorable speakers, ladies and gentlemen. I, Mr. Rudra Narayan Das, on behalf of the organizers, extend my heartfelt welcome to all to this international conclave of Ranjitguru Memorial Series of International Webinar. This webinar is an initiative by the Department of History and Political Science, Jawaharlal Nehru College, Cuttack, in a close collaboration with Center for Adivasi Research and Development Studies, Odisha. I feel happy to express that we have successfully concluded the 110th round of panel discussion yesterday. In today's session, I feel extremely honored to introduce our guest speakers, who is none other than Professor Rikio Kaneko and Professor Srinivasulu NS. It's a pride privilege to introduce and host all of you, sir. The broad theme of our international conclave is kept as Initiative Policy Dialogue 2020, COVID-19, and Live Practice Beyond Pandemic. Now, I would like to rest here and invite Professor Payal Agarwal to go for a brief introductions of our guests and also a welcome address. Over to you, Ms. Payal Agarwal. Ma'am, please check your internet. You are not audible.
I hope it's okay.
Yes, ma'am. Start from me.
Okay. First and foremost, a very warm greetings to one and all. Today we have with us an eminent personality who is none other than Professor Rikio Kaneko. He is an honorable professor of Sapporo University in International Law and Relations. While he worked there, he established World Citizens Court, judges of which were to be elected by individuals, world autonomies, and states. After retirement, he established, in cooperation with his 300 friends and acquaintances, Peaceful Organization for Community of Northeast Asia, which is of far comprehensive in the sense that it had 22. A court of Northeast Asia was one of the peaceful organizations for Community of Northeast Asia's principal organ. Now here in 20, here is the most inclusive and unprecedented international organization, that is a loving organization. The principle is friendship and among nations. Membership of the organization is open to individuals, autonomies, and states. It is an interesting issue for all of them. Members have neither any legal duties, for example, to open reply, or any financial duties like a membership fee or any kind of fees. Participation. Can you serve from the core of our topic as suggested by you is Earth friendlier code in our next speaker is the key advisor of research. Research NS currently works law, University Medical Center, also a member of International Council of Jurists London. We welcome, sir. Your topic, as suggested by you, is realities of 21st century, practice life with pandemic. Now, after this brief introduction, I would like to stop here and invite Professor Rikio Kaneko to initiate his talk. Over to sir.
Professor Rikio, you are muted. Please unmute.
I will be requesting Professor Rikio to please unmute his mic so that we can listen to him.
Hello, Professor Rikio. You are not audible to us. Please unmute your mic. Hello, Professor Rikyo, can you hear us? Please unmute your mic, sir. Hello, hello, Professor Rikyo, you are not audible. Please unmute your mic, sir. Hello, Professor Rikyo, you are not audible. You are not audible to us. Please unmute your mic, sir. You are visible, but your voice is not clear. Unmute कर लीजिए. There is some technical issues from the side of Professor Rikio. Now I would like to invite Professor Srinivasulu to initiate his talk. Over to you, Professor Vasulu.
Thank you. Let us bear with that technical connectivity issue with Professor Rikio. Once he is back, we can hand over the session to him. And in fact, there is some small change in the topic of my uh, lecture today. Unlike what you have announced, I'll be actually speaking on the role of international organizations in Adivasi research and development. As Professor Rikio from Japan is supposed to speak on the organization called Earth Loving Friendly Organization, which is an international organization, and he is heading that organization as the president. He is the founder president, and that organization is having its branches across the globe, and they are going pan world. So, like that, there are a number of international organizations, right, which are working currently. I'm trying to look into all such organizations, internationally recognized organizations, or regional organizations, or the organizations such as the one that Professor Rikyo is having at Sapporo, Japan, while tracing their role in developing Adivasi research and development in terms of ensuring Adivasi research and development, because our main purpose and theme is to see and ensure that we evolve an inclusive policy for the purpose of developing Adivasi. And as the Center for Adivasi Research and Development, Odisha, is aiming to ensure that whatever debates, whatever programs, workshops that we conduct, at the end of the day, give some impetus, or let us draw some observations in terms of ensuring that we are able to help out, push, aid, assist our Adivasis in terms of joining the mainstream, and as well in evolving a policy, broader inclusive policy for their purpose, their development, for ensuring their dignified life in not only in the state of Odisha but across the country. So, as I mentioned, international organizations recognized by the United Nations, international organizations not recognized by United Nations are present across the globe, which are also working towards ensuring the development of Aboriginal, traditional, indigenous, or Adivasi. We are using the term Adivasi in the Indian context, but internationally or across the globe, they use the term indigenous people or Aboriginal people, right? So in most of the international texts, you get to see the word indigenous people, which is nothing but in our Indian context, Adivasi, right? So Adivasi in the Indian scenario and indigenous people in the international scenario is one and the same. So these international organizations, whatever we have, are actually talking about the status, dignity, livelihood, empowerment, and well-being of indigenous people, tribal people, Adivasi people, right? To begin with, we have United Nations. United Nations is an international organization which was adopted in the 1948. United Nations is having more or less almost all the 215 nations, whatever we have got today, right? Most of the nations are party. 99% of the nations are party to this United Nations, organization, UN organization. We call it as United Nations organization. And United Nations organizations actually lays down number of legal texts pertinent to making of international law. It also talks about evolving international treaties, agreements, international peace and tranquility, international diplomacy, international relations, right? And brotherhood among us, different races, different ethnic people, and between different jurisdictions, nations, and regions. So we can call it as an international government as such. Without, of course, you cannot maybe technically use the term, but still, United Nations is the most appropriately accepted platform with respect to providing guidelines to one and all, including that of your national government. So in that way, we can say that United Nations, is the torch bearer. United Nations is the so-called government with respect to laying down some law, which will be again followed by most of the nations or states, right? So United Nations also talks about empowering indigenous people or tribal people or Adivasi people in the Indian context. So when they talk about indigenous people's rights, we have a separate international treaty, conventions adopted by the United Nations with respect to the rights of indigenous people or Adivasi people, whatever we call it as. So this convention of the United Nations, which was being formulated by United Nations as the internationally acclaimed organization, right? So it has rolled down this convention, which talks about ensuring dignified life to tribal people or indigenous people. How to ensure dignified life to tribal people or indigenous people? Because these people are actually living close to the nature. They are into forests. They are not part of the mainstream. They don't have access to mainstream economy, mainstream infrastructure, information whatsoever. Such being the case, they are downtrodden, they are aboriginal, they are close to the nature, and they do not know the lifestyles of the civilized world, whatever we have in the contemporary scenario. So such being the case, how exactly you can ensure their well-being? By their well-being, you can ensure by letting them to do whatever they are doing, by letting them to live wherever they are living, by letting them to walk closely to the nature, by letting them to be in forests wherever they are, whatever they are doing, let them to whatever they are at their best. They are best in maintaining the forest, they are best in living close to the nature, right? They are best in conserving biodiversity, they are best in taking care of number of cattle, animals and all near and around forests. So by letting them do whatever they are best at, whatever they have been doing from generations, that is the best way of empowering them, ensuring them a life which is decent and dignified. So this international treaty on the rights of indigenous people, as formulated by one of the international organizations such as the United Nations, talks about letting these indigenous people, Adivasi people, to live in their own vicinities, in their own forest lands, right? And this concept comes to a serious debate because now, because of various developmental activities, now we are encroaching the forest lands. We are actually trying to evacuate the Adivasi people, tribal people into some other new areas which they are not familiar with, and forcing them to live the life which they do not like or which they are not habituated to. So all these developmental activities for which you are trying to relocate tribal people or Adivasi people, that goes against their right. That's what this United Nations organizations convention on the indigenous people talks about, right? For the purpose of development of the other people in the mainstream economy, you are trying to dislocate these people who do not know any other way of life than that of living close to the nature, right? So if you acquire forest, if you acquire lands, and not only going for deforestation but as well throwing these people away, that means you are doing two damages. One is the destroying the forest, number one, causing damage to the nature's bounty, and number two, throwing these people away. So they too have their own right to dignified decent living, right? Like you and me, like everybody else. But for the sake of economic development, when these kind of constructions or developmental activities take place, this convention says that it should not be at the cost of the tribal people, because tribal people's dignified decent life is only in their vicinities where they are trying to live. So without their permission, without their consent, you cannot throw them out, you cannot dislodge them. So it goes against their decent dignified life which has been guaranteed to them by this convention on the rights of indigenous people as formulated by the United Nations, right? Not only that, their livelihood, their life is dependent on forest. So if you are going for deforestation, actually you are eating up their livelihood, because their life is close to the forest nature, and their livelihood is also nothing but working close to the nature and forests, right? So deforestation actually goes against their right to dignified life, right? So developmental activities, if they are at the cost of removing the forest or destroying the forest, that would also go against the rights of the indigenous people. That's what the International Convention on the Indigenous People say. So the convention also says that the mainstream economy or the governments can introduce them the other ways of life, right? By working in industries, taking up farming, horticulture, agriculture, whatsoever. But that should be a substitution. But it should not be a replacement. You cannot ask them, just get out of your forest land, come to say Bhubaneswar or Cuttack, I will give you some job, some construction job, some a job in the real estate, right? That should not be the case. You give them some other work, whichever is possible in their own vicinities, in their own, say, your Koraput district, or in the Vizag district in Andhra Pradesh, or whatsoever. So in there, the development should go near them. You should not take them out from their vicinities and put them into, say, cities, in some slums or whatever, and tell them that I'm giving you rehabilitation, right? We are able to introduce you to the city. You are able to see the sea, you are able to see multiplex, you are able to see the metro, all that. But that sounds nonsense for them, because their life is close to the nature. Their life is in their Koraput village, or Koraput lands, or Vishakhapatnam, or Araku, whatever valleys, right? So what I'm trying to say, these conventions adopted by United Nations organizations clearly says that development should go near them. You should not pull them out, right? So anything by which you are trying to pull them out of their vicinities, their forest lands, or whatsoever, it is against their life. It is against their livelihood. It is against their lifestyle. You are damaging. You are actually causing. You are hurting their life. So the Convention on the Rights of the Indigenous People clearly says that the people who are in the mainstream should not use the tribal people, indigenous people, Adivasi people as pawns for the purpose of ensuring their own development. Sometimes people go on visits to forests for safari and all, tourism and all, and sometimes you go about using, right, forest for different purposes of your economic activities, and that should not be at the cost of these people, right? So if it is very much required to go near to them to provide the proceeds of the development, then only we should go near them, or if they are willing to come out. If they are willing to come out on their own, if they would like to see, say, your Cuttack, Bhubaneswar, Balasore, or whatever, in such case, it is okay, but with their consent. Otherwise, you cannot remove them, you cannot pull them out. Say, I'm constructing a big dam to store water, reservoir I'm constructing, or I'm putting up a new factory or a new industry in your Koraput area, or whichever tribal area, and for that purpose I want you to evacuate yourself, or for that purpose I want to take you out of Koraput and I will put you somewhere in some slum area in Cuttack, Bhubaneswar, and I will give you some small salary, I will give you a ration card, I will give you Aadhaar card, all that you will say, right? But that is actually going against their life. They have indigenous people, they have their own right to decide where they want to live. They have their own right to decide where they want to live. So all these kinds of debate you get to see in this International Convention on the Rights of Indigenous People as adopted by United Nations, right? So United Nations, which is, as I mentioned, which actually steps into the shoes of international governments, because the policy laid down or the conventions adopted by the United Nations are actually having the force of international law, and the policy laid down by United Nations is actually followed by most of the nations. So we have informally given the status of international government to the United Nations, right? So it is the biggest international organization that we have ever seen, right? United Nations is the biggest, widest, deepest, and the most popular international organization that we could ever see aftermath of the Second World War, or even today it is in existence with more than 75 years of its 77 years of its standing, right? So alongside United Nations, we have some other international organizations also, which also talks about laying down law and policy for the purpose of ensuring human rights in general, and as well, in particular, the rights of the people, rights of indigenous people, or rights of the Adivasi people, right? So these international organizations are actually subserving the cause of the most popular international organization, that is United Nations, right? And all the other international organizations will be substituting or playing the ancillary role, anchor role, with respect to the broader policy that the United Nations happen to lay down for the purpose of ensuring rights of the people, for the purpose of ensuring law and order in the world, peace and security in the world, and as well to ensure international relations and diplomacy, right? Such being the case, it is a very general organization which talks about number of other things, including that of in the indigenous people rights. But there are certain peripheral, specific, super specialized international organizations which talk about an exclusive subject matter. For example, you have International Court of Justice. This International Court of Justice is basically meant for deciding the disputes between different national jurisdictions. For example, I'll give you. There is one Indian army officer who is caught by Pakistan and who is currently in jail. And the very senior lawyers like Harish Salve and all have argued for him in the International Court of Justice. I think his name is some Junaid or Javed somebody, right? So that person is in the prison of Pakistan from almost from past 10 years, and we were not even knowing that that fellow is actually caught by them. Very only of late we happen to realize. So that matter between, it's actually tussle between India and Pakistan, wherein they have caught that individual, and that matter is now pending before International Court of Justice, right? So now International Court of Justice is going to decide that international dispute, because it is not a dispute between individuals, but it's a dispute between nations, different jurisdictions or different regions. So like that, you have number of international organizations which are with a specific purpose. International Court of Justice to settle international legal disputes, right? Likewise, you have World Trade Organizations, which talks about trade relations amongst the nations. World Trade Organization talks about trade relations amongst the nations. And similarly, you have ILO, International Labor Organization, which talks about the labor-related issues between and amongst nations. And in that labor, there could be indigenous people also, tribal also, farmer also, right? So in general, labor, right? Similarly, you have IMF, International Monetary Fund. And International Monetary Fund is like an international bank, like we have Reserve Bank of India in India. This is IMF is like International Monetary Fund is like international bank. Now, along with this World Bank, you have World Bank also. You have International Monetary Fund also, which are actually recognized by your United Nations also. So likewise, specific this World Bank or your International Monetary Bank, talk about giving loans, funds to the governments, right? Not to individuals or corporate houses, but to the governments themselves, maybe the state government or central government. We have seen also the number of states in India, including the state of Odisha, Andhra Pradesh, they have borrowed loans from say your World Bank for the purpose of say constructing roads, bridges, developmental activities and all. Even government of India has also borrowed it, right? So likewise, these organizations actually meant for providing some financial support. Number of times our state governments in particular have taken loans from these organizations, monetary organizations, for the purpose of providing access to road to the people who are in Adivasi, or constructing roads in forest areas, or ensuring a better life support system to be in place in the Adivasi area or in the indigenous people communities, right? Because if this kind of touchy issues are taken up, the World Bank or International Monetary Fund, for that matter, without much hurdle, they will sanction you, money or loan, whatever you call it. So, number of times, state and central governments have used this as an option to get money, borrow money. Right? They will show that the money we are borrowing is for ensuring the welfare of the people who are indigenous, but at the end of the day, whose welfare it is going to, everybody knows, right? So what I'm trying to say is these international organizations also are keeping in mind about the development of Adivasis. If it is a matter pertinent to Adivasis or indigenous people, most of these organizations, international organizations, they are doing their level best. Like International Monetary Fund or World Bank, they're giving loan, right? Similarly, International Court of Justice, they're adjudicating disputes involving the people in general and as well Adivasis, right? So likewise, you have law of the sea tribunal. Sometimes over the sea during any travel voyage, if you cross the territorial waters, or when we get into the water levels of other country or international seas, then you will be caught, right? Because like we divide physically the physical land, even the sea is also divided. The sea up till 10 to 12 nautical miles will be your sea. Sea, but sea belonging to or connected to your nation. After 12 nautical miles, you get to see the continental zone. That continental zone is a free zone area, right? Like your bypass roads. There everybody can travel. But after that, you get to see high seas. Like this, you have divided the sea also, like you have divided the earth into different countries, continents, like that. So sea is also divided. So within 12 nautical miles, your vessels, your ships can sail through. But while doing so, if you happen to accidentally or incidentally, touch upon or enter any other nation's sea or waters, territorial waters, then you will be caught. For example, number of times Sri Lanka happened to catch the fishermen of India, especially people from Tamil Nadu and Kerala, they happen to catch, saying that you have crossed my territorial limits, my territorial water limits, like that. So to adjudicate those types of disputes, you have this International Court of Justice. Believe me, most of these fishermen are again falling into this community or this broader, civic society called Aboriginal or indigenous people, right? Indigenous people need not be only confined to forests, but these people who are dependent on the fishing activity, they're also actually outside the mainstream economy and they do not know anything apart from fishing. So most of these fishermen who are also called as Adivasi or tribal people, right, in the sea coast areas and all, right, when they venture into fishing in the international waters, whenever they get caught by other nations, patrolling ships and all. And in case of such disputes, you have international court of the international law of the sea tribunal. It also debates substantially the issues pertinent to catching and releasing of fishermen or Adivasi people, tribal people, with respect to while they are indulging in themselves in fishing. So what I'm trying to say is all these international organizations, right? They are whenever there is a touchy issue of Adivasi or indigenous people, human rights of these people, decent and dignified life comes to the debate in front of these organizations. They are doing their level best. But what is happening at national level? What is happening at state level, local level, domestic level? That is debatable. At international level, because it is at the policy level, guideline level, or broader level, things are upright. You have everything possible, but that has to be executed, implemented, right? Get done at the national, local level. So whether it is actually happening there, whatever these international organizations are doing at their level best in ensuring decent and dignified life for the tribal people, Aboriginal people, indigenous people, or Adivasi people, with whatever title you call them as, that whether it is reaching actually to them or not. As I mentioned, number of times governments have borrowed money from World Bank, saying that we are using this money for ensuring decent and dignified life for the people who are Adivasis. We would like to give them ration. We would like to give them, double bedroom houses. We would like to give them that, these and all number of things they will, give in the form of DPR, right? Project report, and they will get money. And there is no cross check whether World Bank is cross checking and coming to your Koraput area or any tribal area that whatever money that has been obtained, in the form of a loan, whether it has actually gone to the actual person, actual people, community to whom it is supposed to reach, right? So there is no such kind of cross check. And even those people who are actually bringing that money, right? You are actually borrowing loan. You need to repay it with interest at the end of the day. And these people are also not accountable. They are also not transparent. And the term indigenous, Adivasi, Aboriginal, tribal has become a buzzer zone, or it has become a hashtag. In the current day technological context, right? You use this word and you get through everything. You get loans, you get away with any disputes, litigation, you get sympathy, you get mercy, you get that, this, and everything, right? So it has become a buzzword. It has become a hashtag now. You use the word tribal people, Adivasi people, Aboriginal people, or indigenous people, whatever you call it as, you get through everything. Right? So it has become now euphoria. It has become now a menace that people use this title word for the sake of getting through their vote. Maybe at government level, private level, or national level, regional level, whatever you say. I'm sorry, but this is the reality, right? But that is not done. And by you doing that, also you are actually violating, abridging the rights of indigenous people, and which is not acceptable at any level, at any civil level, and it is actually forbidden, prohibited by the international law through these number of international organizations. There is one more international organization that I would like to make a special mention here. That is World Intellectual Property Organization, WIPO, right? It is at Geneva, World Intellectual Property Organization, right? This organization is basically meant for ensuring intellectual property rights, right? In general. But at the end of the day, this organization is also working on protecting the traditional Aboriginal people's artifacts, traditional Aboriginal people's artistic work, traditional Aboriginal people's community work, right? Folklore, which is actually under copyright law. Folklore is actually the knowledge, traditional knowledge of our indigenous people, our Adivasi people, that is protected. So this organization, World Intellectual Property Organization, is ensuring that the knowledge, creativity of our Aboriginal people, tribal people is actually protected. And by ensuring that protection for their Adivasi knowledge, you call it as folklore in the context of copyright law. The World Intellectual Property Organization is doing their level best to ensure the protection of their right. Similarly, the rights of farmers, the rights of tribal people, the rights of people who are the forest dwellers, the rights of people who are actually producing certain traditional cultural products from either from the forest lands or from the other lands, are the sales of products of the people who tribal people or aboriginal people, wherein they collect some goods, forest goods from forest lands and try to sell it out in some other civilized areas, or urban, semi-urban, or metro areas. So all these things are there actually, either their products either produced, collected, nurtured, or gathered, and that is also actually given protection through the regulations, or the treaties adopted by this the World Intellectual Property Organization. So what I'm trying to say is, intellectual creative efforts, traditional knowledge of our Aboriginal people is actually protected by this kind of international organization. So like this, if you go around these number of international organization, at international level you have everything set, you have everything upright. Any issue pertinent to Adivasi people, or any issue pertinent to our Aboriginal or tribal people, indigenous people, you have set norms at international level. You have set standards at international level. But what is happening at national level, and what is happening at state level? We do have certain bodies, we do have certain organizations in India. At national level, you have the commission, tribal commission, scheduled tribe commission. You have a separate ministry. From past 20-25 years, we have separate ministry for the scheduled tribes. Earlier, it was not there, right? At a state level, also we have the state tribal commissions in most of the nation, most of the states, and also you have a tribal ministry, right? So you have setup, right? You have system. Now the question is whether these organizations, system, setups, ministries, commissions, whatever we have, different bodies, whether they are able to execute the policy which is actually meant for the tribal people or Adivasi people. Whether that policy is fool-free, whether that policy is suitable in the contemporary scenario, nobody is there to look in. So academicians like you and me, scholars like you and me, we will have to involve ourselves in reviewing these policies that the international organizations or international bodies have actually provided for, right? You need not accept as it is. For example, a particular policy as laid down by United Nations may not be suitable to us. It may be suitable to the American indigenous people whom you call as Red Indians, right? Red Indians are the actual Adivasis in America, and most of the people who are now settled in America are actually from Europe, right? So the 32 crores of population, whatever we have in USA, more than 30 crores of population is actually migrated people from Europe who are actually settled there, right? So the real Aboriginal people of America are called Red Indians, right? So that community is the tribal community there, right? So likewise, that United Nations guideline or United Nations policy on indigenous people may be suitable in their context, right? It may be suitable in the typical weather conditions of a snowfall and all, but it may not be suitable in our condition, right? In the Indian condition, where you have mixed weather condition, and you have in the Middle East, you have again completely hot condition. So in the Muslim countries or in the Middle East, it is not that you don't have tribal people. There also you have tribal people. For example, you take Pakistan, the state of Baluchistan, right, which borders our Gujarat, right? You have the Karachi, all those places which are connected with Baluchistan. Baluchis are actually tribal people, right? So 60% of the geographic place of Pakistan is actually occupied by Baluchistan, right? And they're also having some issues now with the Pakistan government as well. So Baluchis are actually tribal, but they're Muslims. Similarly, Gilgit-Baltistan of Kashmir, which is into Pak occupied Kashmir, whatever we call it as, though it is shown in Google, it is shown in Indian government's map that it is part of us, but we do not have a control. After Srinagar, we do not have control because we have LOC, which was accepted during Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru's time when there was a war between India and Pakistan. So those areas of Pak occupied Kashmir, which you call as the Gilgit and Baltistan, which is also a Muslim dominated area, there also you have tribal people. So tribal people, tribal population is not just confined to India place, right? Tribal population is there in every continent, every nation, and tribals are there in every religion also. And again, tribals are not confined to Hinduism, right? Tribals are there in Muslimism, tribals are there in Christianity, Jainism, Buddhism. In every religion you have tribal people, because for tribal, religion is not important. For them, forest is God, nature is God, right? They do not follow seriously anything about religion. For them, nature is their mother, and they get everything from their mother only. That's all, right? But in policy making, what happens at national level, or even in the case of this international organization, we look at India dominatingly Hindu population, so most of the tribal must be from Hindu. But it is not true. If you go to the seven sisters of India, northeast places, Assam till Manipur and all, right? There you have tribal populace, but most of them are actually Christians. You may call them as converted Christians or whatever, but they are into Christian. But still, they are given a tribal status, and even the special assistance, privilege, reservation, whatever is given to them. So the point that I'm trying to put across is, unlike the classical understanding with respect to the tribal people, aboriginal people by the international organizations, including that of the government policies, tribal populace is spread across the world. Tribal populace is spread across different ethnicities, different religious, different beliefs, right? Because for them, no religion, no special faith, no continental or national related affinity. For them, forestry is their affinity, nature is their affinity, right? For them, their traditional knowledge is the only knowledge. And for them, Mother Earth is their religion, Mother Earth is their God, and Mother Earth is their friend, right? Such being the case, tribal populace is there across. But what is happening at the end of the day, when people make law and policy, right? Maybe at international level by these international organizations, at national level by the government, while evolving the policy, right? When they say that this is meant for Adivasi development, Adivasi ensuring dignity and decency to Adivasi people or whatever policy they try to pull out for the purpose of ensuring welfare and development of Adivasis, some internal informal thinking will be there about their ethnicity, heritage, their religion, their local geographic affinity. That shouldn't be there, right? There is a concept in Sanskrit called Vishwamano, right? And these tribal people are the real Vishwamano, because across the globe, without any typical religious, faith, geographic related affinity, they are there. They are the real Vishwamanos. Unlike the civilized society people who always talk about either class mass in terms of their economic background, they talk about some religious faith and all, right? And even continental or geographic affinity and all. These people, right? They do not have any such affinity or affiliations. That's why they are the real pan world Adivasis. They are the real champions of peace and diplomacy across the globe. They are the real champions for ensuring international relations, global relations, and international development. That's why they are the real Vishwamanos, because they are the Manos who are present across Vishwa, across the world, without any reservation, affinity, linkage to any so-called orthodox understanding with respect to faith, religion, or geographic affinity, skin color, texture, whatsoever. That's why the real concept of Vishwamanava suits better them. But when you come to these international organizations or the state governments, when they talk about formulating law and policy, this concept is missing. They evolve a policy, say tribal people from Odisha, tribal people from Kerala, right? Even they do not even say tribal people across the country. You are not even giving the pan-India recognition to them, right? Being the government of India, being the government of, say, the respect to state government, you are failing to give them the pan-state or pan-India recognition, right? You are trying to fix them into one particular village or one particular jungle, saying that the people of this village, people of this forest, or this state, or this local, like that you are going about, right? So you are trying to fix them, you're trying to marginalize them in your policy making itself, right? Why don't you call them as the Adivasis in general, Vishwamanos, right? Tribal populace who are having international affinity without any local, regional, religious, faith related connection whatsoever, right? You are trying to fix them into one particular, connection, saying that tribal populace from, say, Balasore, tribal populace from Koraput, tribal populace from Araku, Nilagiris, or Aravali in Rajasthan, right? Like that you are going about. That shouldn't be there. That shouldn't be there. That's the reason why I'm saying that law and policy, whatever you have actually tried to pull out, either through the international organizations or from the organizations in India, that will meet the real purpose only when you adopt not just pan-India, but across the globe kind of status, purpose with respect to any policy that you would like to bring out for the purpose of ensuring decent and dignified life for the tribal populace, and as well for ensuring the development in their areas. And again, development means not actually asking them to leave their place. Development should reach them. You should go near them. Government should go near them, right? Education should go near them, right? Information should go near them, right? Like you have established now Central University in probably in and around Koraput. So like that kind of activism should take place, right? I'm not again saying that industries should go near them so that they can, land can be acquired and they can be thrown out. I'm talking about development, right? They should be given access to everything, right? We talk about this, when recently I'm not talking about any particular individual, any leader for that matter. We heard about 100 smart cities across the country. Is there any single smart city in the Adivasi vicinities? Is there any single smart city which is identified in nearby the tribal areas? You talk about Visakhapatnam, you talk about Bhubaneswar, you talk about Delhi, Surat and all to be your smart cities, 100 smart cities that the government of India would like to ensure in the coming 10-20 years. Why not even a single tribal area? Why can't tribal become smart? Can't tribal areas become smart cities? Why not? Whatever amount money that you are actually pouring in these big cities which are already big, why don't you do that with respect to any identified tribal community or tribal area? Let that tribal community or area become the smart city or smart tribal city or smart tribal community, smart tribal area, whatever you can call it as, right? Why don't you give them an opportunity? Why are you asking them? You come to Bhubaneswar, you get internet connection. You come to Cuttack, then you have a better digital connectivity. You come there, you go there, you get your education, get your job, whatever. Why are you again forcing them to leave? Right? It's not just for the purpose of your development, construction of dams and all. For everything, you are asking them to come out for education, come out for temples, come out for that, come out for this. Why don't you go in? Right? Why can't you go in? Why can't you go near them? For tourism purposes, for safari purposes, right? You are going near them. But whenever you want to, you are supposed to give something back to them, you are actually asking them to come out. So they don't want to come out. So they feel threatened, they feel frightened, right? So they're away from the mainstream populace, and they're away from, say, education, they're away from employment, livelihood, civilization, all that. So what I'm trying to say is, this inclusive policy, because we at the Center for Adivasi Research and Development, we are talking in terms of inclusive policy for development of Adivasi. How inclusive it should be, and that I'm trying to pull out. How inclusive it should be. Making policy is not just sufficient. That policy should create inroads into not just their lands but their hearts. That policy should create inroads into not just the lands of Adivasi but the hearts of Adivasi. That kind of policy could only be the inclusive policy. Otherwise, we are excluding something, or you are excluding many things, right? So let us not formulate such kind of exclusive policy or excluded policy, but let us try to evolve a policy which is not just going near them, but into their heart, which can feel the presence of or the beat of the heart of the tribal populace, the Adivasi people, indigenous people. That kind of policy we have to adopt to include the tribal populace into mainstream economy. So it is not sufficient just to have some international organizations which are laying down some law, some state central governments are trying to pull out some legislation, some organizations, some commissions trying to say something. But people like you and me should make the inroads. People like you and me, the organizations like Center for Adivasi Research and Development, CARD, and people like you and me will have to make those inroads. Right? It's not possible to depend on for everything on governments, for everything on international organizations, but people like we, social organizations, right, non-profit organizations or academicians will have to reach out and take the responsibility into our hands and try to reach out to them, and then only we can question the international organizations or state governments or such other agencies with respect to the efficacy, viability, competency of their evolved policy with respect to not only the general matters, but in particular about Adivasis, right? So international organizations like United Nations, like International Court of Justice, World Bank, Indian Monetary Fund, World Trade Organization, right? Law of the Sea Tribunal, right? Or for that matter, World Intellectual Property Organization, International Labor Organization, right? World Health Organization, WHO, right? It also talks about ensuring right to health of the people who are into forest lands, who are actually Adivasis. So like such other international organizations not only evolve or not only talk about broader policy with respect to ensuring law and order, international relations, diplomacy, decent and dignified life of people on this earth, but as well, in particular, specifically, they talk about ensuring decent and dignified life for the people who are Adivasis and ensuring law and order, not just in the general sense, but in the real sense with respect to the tribal communities as well, right? So having policy is not sufficient. Having some international organization which is trying to lay down the policy and oversee the policy is not sufficient. It has to be implemented at local level. It ought to be figured out, executed at a domestic level, national level, state level, or even at the marginal level. So I would call upon everyone around. Everybody is having their own obligation. There is some moral mandate as well to ensure that the inclusion of Adivasis is done for the purpose of overall development. Inclusion of Adivasis is done into the general lot of people, mainstream people or mainstream economy, whatever you call it as, for the purpose of ensuring and evolving inclusive policy for the purpose of ensuring development of Adivasis, right? Inclusive policy for ensuring development of Adivasis with the help of a number of international organizations, state governments, number of systems, commissions, and with the great support of organizations and NGOs, including the people who are into academicians and social activism. Their role is also very much required to ensure in adopting for the purpose of evolving and adopting inclusive policy for the purpose of Adivasi development. So I have tried to showcase, or I have tried to highlight how international organizations are playing their role in formulating the required land policy for the purpose of ensuring echoing the language of Adivasis while ensuring that there gets evolved some inclusive policy for the purpose of development of Adivasis at international level and as well the national level. Thank you. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you so much, Professor Srinivasulu. Due to technical issues, Professor Rikio did not able to join again. He said sent us a apology message for us. Now I would like to ask our participants if you have any questions for Professor Srinivasulu, please ask them directly.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Srinivasulu, for a wonderful session. I would like to ask you, tell me what is the real policy in international level as concerned many international agencies is there, World Bank is there, UNESCO is there, UNICEF is there. Then why the poverty reduction not leisure day by day throughout the global south perspective? If you look the district Koraput, one of the terrible and horrible area of global south, because it's a Naxalbari and many people's resistance are there. Secondly, if you look Kalahandi, one of the greatest weaker section peoples are living in that path. And if you look Keonjhar, the one of most significant mining areas related to the border for state Odisha and Jharkhand. What is your specific ideas and what kind of policy we need to improvise ourselves to the best need of the tribal people for the sake of national development, and what you always advocating, don't treat the tribals or the Adivasis as the second class citizen of this country, because in holistic manner of the nature, if you look the tribals are the first and very foremost citizens of this country. What is your observations?
Yeah, thank you. In fact, the two organizations that you mentioned, UNICEF and UNESCO, they have contributed a lot for the development of civilization across the globe, and as well they do have their own guidelines and system earmarked for the development of Adivasi or indigenous people. We have a number of organizations. That's what I have been trying to put across. We have a number of organizations, number of systems, number of guidelines, and things like that. But we are unable to implement the same at local level. And believe me, most of our tribal and Adivasis, they do not even know that there is something which is actually meant to ensure their decent and dignified life. They do not have any awareness. And people, as I said, people are using this tribal Adivasi as a buzzword, hashtag, to get their work done, to get some policy laid down, right? During election, you will evolve some policy saying that, see, I am going to do this much and all for within 5 years, I will turn like this or turn like that, and all the people will say, right? For the purpose of some gimmick, election gimmick or whatsoever, or for the purpose of obtaining some loan, some project or whatsoever from, say, UNESCO, UNICEF, IMF or World Bank. Governments go with by using this buzzword, saying that we are trying to do this for the sake of ensuring development of Adivasi communities. But at ground level, it is not happening. How many Adivasi MPs you have elected? How many Adivasi MLAs you have elected? How many Adivasi CMs you have seen? How many of your governors are there, right? Who can question? And even if they are there, they are not questioning. Their sound is muted. Like that, it is happening. So that is the problem. That's the reason why the real proceeds are not reaching the targeted people, or the people who should have received it. So the problem is our failure in implementation, right? I blame it on everybody. I don't just blame it on the central or state government, and as well you and me. We have failed in general, because When government is failing, we are not questioning. We are keeping quiet. When state government is failing, central government is failing, local government is failing, we are keeping quiet. Or when the people who are working for, say, who are working in this tribal commission or the tribal ministry, when they are doing something wrong, we are keeping quiet. Right. So you and me also equal accountable, responsible for non-implementation of the law, which is supposed to be implemented at the ground level. So it's not just system failure, but it's a systematic failure, right? It's not just a system failure, but it's a systematic failure where every one of us have contributed our level best, unfortunately, for ensuring that this policy is failing. So we have to change ourselves. Our perception will have to change. Our personality will have to change. We should stop, first of all, as I said, I again repeat, you should not treat the so-called people as second-rate citizens, saying that these people are second-rate, I'm giving something, I'm donating something, I'm contributing something. If with this attitude, if you go, you would like to keep them always their own, right? You are treating them as second-rated people, and you are thinking that you are giving them something, or you are contributing something, and they're living at your mercy, or they're living the pity life. So such kind of attitude people are having. That's the reason why even after decades, even after centuries, their status is remaining there only, because your mental feeling, or whatever psychological occupation you have kept, you pour 1,000 crores, right? But it is of no use until unless you change your psychological reaction, right? Even some the Adivasi people or tribal people who are in, say, the most sophisticated multiplexes or metro areas also, right? They are also not getting any better kind of treatment. They may be educated, they may be in employment, they may be having money, whatever, and all that, but still society looks down on them, saying that you are XYZ, right? So until unless your psychological reaction changes, right, unless your personality changes, mind frame changes, nothing will happen. This is the ground reality that I've accepted. You may bring thousands of crores, you may make every tribal village as a smart city. No use as long as you are unable to change the mindset of common people. So common man is responsible for everything. I don't blame on anybody, any system, or any government whatsoever. Common man, please change your mindset. Then only the development can happen. After all, they're also human beings, right? They are not animals. They're also human beings like you. They too have 2 hands and 2 legs like you, right? They're also living, breathing like you. So then why this discrimination? You adopt dogs, cats as your pets, but why don't you adapt? Why don't you forget about adopting? Why don't you just handle people nicely, right? You don't have any animosity. You like pets, dogs, cats, and all, which are into different species altogether. But you don't like somebody who is a tribal. You don't like somebody who is the indigenous people. How shameful it is! You are actually ditching. You are actually discriminating within your own species, right? You house different animals. Even birds also. You take care of them. Very good, nice, fantastic. It should be done. At the same time, why don't you do that with your fellow tribal indigenous people? That is the problem. That is the problem, right? Change your mindset, change your psychological reaction, accept them, adopt them, right? Then only you can ensure that the real development can take place. It will take time, I agree, it will take time, but you have to change the mindset. Some civilized nations like USA, Canada, and all, they are able to do this because they have changed their mindset, right? I'm not saying that in USA, Canada, and such other nations you don't have tribal populace. They have, but the other people, the other lot, doesn't look down on them. So their psychological reaction, their mind frame is different from us, right? So when we do that, the real change, real development, real inclusion, that is the real inclusion, right? You may go and embrace them, but in your mind you have kept this fellow is that. That is not inclusion. You are only physically including them, but originally you are not. So that kind of inclusion should be there from your mind itself. Then only can not only evolve an inclusive policy, but you can ensure that the tribal populace development is arrived at.
Sir, can I ask one more question, if you could allow me?
Sure, why not?
Okay, thank you, sir. Sir, what kind of development we are talking here? The tribal people, they rejected this development model, the psychological, what I call psychological development model, because they don't need our development. This development impose on their livelihood, their cultural genesis, their identity, and also not develop their the particular mainstreaming of these tribals. What kind of impose of tribal concerns to mainstreaming them? We call them and we displace them their own motherland, and try to snatch out their land for the sake of development paradigm of so-called industrialization. They don't need industrialization. They just say, get out from our land. This land is our forefathers, and you people don't snatch our lands from us. Just keep us with the healthy and prosperity life to save our motherland. If you look the Kalinganagar movement in, I will add one more information towards you. I know you are so familiar with these movements, particular Odisha state, such a wonderful state to know the hub of social movements. If you look the, you are from West Bengal and you must documented the movement of Mamata Banerjee ji, the Nandir and Sindhugram movement. What Nano project was sincerely get out from West Bengal and they don't allow to do Tata to build a nano project there. But we always welcome many industrialists. If you look, last time one great conclave made here by our state, that is called Make in Odisha. Through Make in Odisha, they sensitize their industrialization and they try to, terrorize these tribal people. They always try to snatch their lands from tribal minority lands, such as mining areas and such as the hilly areas. These areas, the tribal people, when we are talking about 62 tribes and sorry to say primitive tribes are living in my state with happily, and 24% of the entire population of my state is belongs to tribal people. If you look the last elections report, 54% only people are going to vote. Don't use meat and also this wine for the capacity discrimination related to the tribal minority, and give their vote and kick out them for 5 years. Don't allow to disillusion the capacity of understanding what kind of state going to do for the sake of development. What is your views on particular development? Rather need a sensitized development or terrorized development, or need a healthy, peaceful, sustainable and the nature protected oriented development for them? What is your view, sir?
Yeah, what you said is true. Development doesn't mean industrialization. Development doesn't mean metros and multiplexes, right? Of course, people would have their own different perspectives, but I go by the development which is close to the heart, right? People, as you said, people in the aboriginal areas or forest areas, they're fine. They're happy. Whether you are happy or not, that should be the sign of the development, right? Now today, Denmark happens to be the happiest country in the world, but Denmark is not the richest country in the world. Similarly, Switzerland, Laos, Luxembourg, areas of Europe, they're also happier, but they are not the richest. Your richest countries are USA and UK, right? Most probably, and maybe in the Middle East. But in those areas only you have most of the crimes are committed there only. So the point is, development is not always inclusive of the happiness. So happiness is something which you try to get from within you or through the people who are around you, right? So the examples of Denmark and all, not being the richest country but still happiest country, right? Similarly, in the context of the debate that we are having now here, development doesn't mean only the infrastructure building. That is only material form of development, right? And material form of development is immaterial for the tribal populace, because for them having big house, AC, car is not required for them, because they want to sleep on the lap of the mother earth. That could be their Dunlop cot, bed or whatsoever. So when they are living that close to the nature, when they're happy with the nature, whatever development that you were trying to give them, double bedroom house or that and all, is actually dislodging them from their comfort zone, right? So what I'm trying to say is, let them live the way they are living. Let them live the way they are living, close to the nature, right? And if required, with their consent, whatever they are asking or whatever is required, say for example, maybe regarding health, they may be requiring some support, or for education, they may be requiring some support. That's all. So health related stuff or education related stuff you try to give, but don't dislodge them, or don't ask them to adapt something, learn something new, change their lifestyle, right? Become a corporate employee, or become a labor. They are forest dwellers. They know how to use and handle the forest. They may be farmers also. So let them live their life in the best natural habitat way that they are living. right? And only in the connection of health education, you may try to give something, because that may be required not only for the tribal or Adivasi people, for everybody around. So I don't buy the argument that development means industrialization and fixing some metro there, or having some multiplex over there. It's not that. Real development means something which is liked by you, by which you are comfortable, and by which you are having the satisfaction.
Thank you, Professor Srinivasu. Now, another question is from Shubham Das. He's trying to ask how liberal democracy values for tribal community.
Liberal democracy actually doesn't give any value to tribal populace. That is actually reflective in the way you are getting vote share in election, right? Not even 50% of the tribal populace is participating in election. They are not participating in democracy. So then the other living democratic worlds, how they would reciprocate on this issue, right? So in terms of Adivasi issues, democracy has failed, because democracy takes care of majority, majority follows majority opinion, and in most of the states, in most of the areas, tribal people are minority, so their voice is never heard. Their voice never reaches your parliament, their voice never reaches your assembly, because they are minority, and democracy only goes by majority. So that being the case, in democratic world, the issues pertinent to tribal are getting marginalized because of this.
Thank you so much, Professor Srinivasu. Now, uh, we have to conclude the session. So, good afternoon again. It's my pleasure to go for a formal vote of thanks. First of all, I would like to thank our esteemed guest, Professor Srinivasu, for their insights on the tribal issues, and also extend my hearty thanks to Dr. Vikram Jena, Director CARD, Chinmay Sahu, Executive Director CARD Odisha, for their cooperation to organize this webinar. Also like to express my profound gratitude to Professor Pallab Chakravarti for their cooperation, and also like to thank the convener of Professor Sarat Chandra Pradhan, Shubham Das, co-convener, and Payal Agarwal, Baidev Das, for their support and guidance. I'm happy to express the vote of thanks to all the participants, including academics, students, media persons, civil society members who have made this webinar a grand success, for sparing their valuable time with us. Thank you. The meeting is concluded now.